Few horror movie survivors make it to the end of the film entirely unscathed, because we as genre fans simply love seeing underdog heroes get put through the ringer in order to basically earn their victory. Yet sometimes filmmakers perhaps take things too far and have their surviving characters endure a basically comical amount of punishment, enough that we start to question precisely how they were able to survive their horrific injuries. So with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with What Culture, here with horror movie characters who survived horrific injuries. Dr. Loomis survives a ridiculous explosion in Halloween 2. At the end of Halloween 2, Dr. Sam Loomis sacrifices himself to kill Michael Myers, flicking his lighter on and igniting a gas-filled hospital room, seemingly obliterating the pair of them. Though we see a flaming Michael fall down dead, we never actually see Loomis's corpse, and lo and behold, he shows up alive and well in Halloween 4: The Return of Michael Myers. The sequel, set a decade later, makes little reference to Loomis's improbable survival, beyond giving him some facial scars. It's hilariously difficult to believe that Loomis could have survived, let alone not suffered extreme burns over his entire body, given the size of the explosion in Halloween 2. According to Halloween 4 writer Alan B. McElroy, he originally wrote an opening scene which showed Loomis being thrown from the fiery hospital room by the explosion, thereby explaining, albeit somewhat conveniently, how he came back largely unscathed. Noah gets her backside surgically removed in Fresh. Noah is the protagonist of black comedy horror Fresh, a young woman who meets the hunky Steve, the apparent man of her dreams who is quite predictably too good to be true. When spending the night at Steve's home, Noah is drugged and wakes up chained, where she learns that Steve is a butcher of human meat. He typically lures young women to his home to surgically remove the finest cuts of meat from their bodies for his wealthy clients. After Noah attempts to escape, Steve punishes her by incapacitating her and then surgically removing her buttocks, like her whole damn backside. And even accepting that Steve did this in a surgical manner, which would be less painful than, say, someone randomly hacking her butt cheeks away with a rusty saw, that's still a ridiculously traumatic injury that's going to change how you live the rest of your life. Chad Meeks Martin survives 7 stab wounds in Scream. The Scream franchise has a time-honoured tradition of beloved characters surviving traumatic injuries, and though Dewey finally went down for the count after surviving countless brushes with death in the prior films, there were other characters left to take up his invincible mantle. Though it was genuinely surprising to see Tara survive the opening Ghostface assault, at least most of her 7 stab wounds weren't immediately life-threatening, but rather defensive wounds sustained in non-vital areas of the body. The same can't really be said for Randy Meeks' nephew, Chad, who late in the film is attacked by Ghostface and stabbed 7 times in the leg, the back, and numerous times in the stomach. At the end of the scene, it sure looks like Chad is bleeding out, but at film's end, he's revealed to have inexplicably survived his injuries. Given how long Chad spent bleeding on the lawn before the ambulance arrived, it's basically a miracle that he made it. But considering how awesome a character he turned out to be, it was easy to forgive. Josh loses his penis to a piranha in Piranha 3DD. Piranha 3DD may not be a good movie, a pretty terrible one by most accounts in fact, but it does boast one of the most memorably, creatively gnarly, non-fatal injuries. Poor Josh, who was simply planning on some sex with his girlfriend Shelby, yet unbeknownst to both of them, a prehistoric carnivorous piranha managed to swim inside her vagina while they were skinny dipping earlier. And so when they're getting down to business, the piranha emerges and bites Josh on the penis, quickly prompting him to withdraw in pain. We get a lingering, revolting, and a teensy bit hilarious glimpse of Josh's engorged member topped with a hungry piranha before he makes a drastic decision in order to save his life. Josh reluctantly grabs a nearby knife and chops his own penis off, an injury which, without medical attention, can certainly be fatal. However, Josh and Shelby both end up surviving the film despite their intrusive encounter with a piranha, even if in Josh's case the injuries are most certainly life-changing. Quinton Smith is brutally beaten and horribly slashed in A Nightmare on Elm Street. 2010's A Nightmare on Elm Street remake may not be up to much, but who among us actually expected the quiet, nerdy Quinton to make it to the end in one piece? He certainly takes a fair pasting from Freddy Krueger though. In the film's climax, Quinton is horrifically slashed across the chest by Freddy's bladed glove, slammed around the dream world, stabbed again by Freddy, thrown against a wall and further assaulted. And yet, despite having a neon signpost around him that says victim, he actually survives the movie, with Nancy saving him and taking Freddy out just in time. Hilariously, Quinton proves so unexpectedly hardy and resilient that Freddy even quips at him, "Now why don't you just effing die?" Quinton certainly isn't in a good way by film's end, being taken off in an ambulance with Nancy at his side, but he nevertheless makes it out alive. He has his genitals destroyed and leg drilled in Antichrist. The movie follows an unnamed couple who, following the accidental death of their infant son, head to a cabin retreat in the hope of patching things up, only for quite the opposite to happen. The film climaxes with the husband, he, strangling his wife, she, to death before burning her on a funeral pyre. But he only survives after having withstood a stomach-churning amount of injury, including one of the most graphic genital-related catastrophes ever committed to film. As their respective psyches break down, the pair become violent towards one another, culminating in an unforgettable sequence where she smashes his crotch to bits with a block of wood and then forcefully masturbates him while he's unconscious, causing him to ejaculate blood. From there, she then drills a hole through his leg and bolts a grindstone through the wound before trying to bury him alive, because why the hell not? He survives the events of the movie, but at what cost? His knackers got crushed into a fine paste and he murdered his wife. Mia Allen gets molested by a tree and possessed in Evil Dead. Anyone concerned that 2013's Evil Dead reimagining wouldn't live up to Sam Raimi's wild original certainly had their mind changed sharpish, given the film's absolutely hellacious treatment of its new protagonist Mia Allen. For starters, Mia is violated by a demonically possessed tree in similar fashion to Raimi's original film, causing her to become possessed. While possessed, she scalds herself in the shower, slices her tongue in half with a box cutter, and is buried alive by her brother. And even after she's freed of possession, her arm is crushed by a jeep, forcing her to rip it off in order to free herself. Oh, and she's dealing with heroin withdrawal throughout all of this, just to make it even worse. Paul Sheldon survives a car crash and has his ankles broken in Misery. Misery's embattled protagonist Paul Sheldon certainly earns his survival by film's end, having endured a cringe-worthy degree of punishment from his violently crazed superfan Annie Wilkes. But first off, Sheldon survives a gnarly car accident which gives him broken legs and a dislocated shoulder, as well as leaving him in the care of Nurse Annie. Annie then keeps Paul imprisoned in her home, and when he recuperates enough to try and stage an escape, she responds by administering one of the most wince-inducing injuries in cinema history. Annie uses a sledgehammer to break Paul's ankles, hobbling him and ensuring he won't be mobile enough to escape her clutches. While not gory, Rob Reiner's sublime direction expertly milks the moment for every drop, aided by superb sound design and fantastic acting from both leads. Even when Paul successfully makes his last stand against Annie, he's shot in the shoulder before he's finally able to overcome her. In the film's epilogue, Paul is shown to still walk with a cane 18 months after the incident, and he makes it clear that he's still suffering psychologically from the encounter.